Welcome to the Real Lost Boss podcast.
Hello and welcome to episode 54 of the Real Lost Boss podcast. What it is like to be morbidly obese. Yeah, I'm going to open up about what my life was like as someone that was over 500 pounds. I was 37 stone for a good few years of my life before I started my weight loss journey. And I'm fully aware I've reflected a little bit about what my mental health was like just before I started my weight loss journey and things that kind of triggered me to start my weight loss journey. But I don't think I've ever delved into what Neil lived with or what his life was like pre-weight loss journey. You guys only really know me from when I started doing social media in 2021. Because there's no social media content kind of previous to that because I didn't do any. Well, I tell a lie there. I came up with the idea of the Real Lost Boss in 2019, and I did set up a Facebook page and an Instagram account and a YouTube channel, and I did post little bits on there, but nothing compared to what I did from the start of 2021. It was, I think, the third lockdown of COVID, and that's when I went in head first into the world of social media. And like I say, a lot of you guys only really know me from that point. I have talked a lot about my weight loss journey from the beginning of 2014, so I think you can put bits together from there. But the only thing I really have talked about, like I said, I've reflected in quite a small way about my mental health pre-weight loss journey. But the only thing I've really got as evidence to show what Neil was like as a 37 stone man was pictures that I've pulled off other people's Facebooks because I hated having my picture taken. So I pulled pictures off other people's Facebook pre-weight loss journey. And I do use those a lot in before and afters and on things like my weekly weight loss vlog thumbnails and stuff like that. But I want to tell you what I was like at that size, like more of a day-to-day basis kind of thing. And I'm not doing this for a sympathy vote. I just think it's quite important to open up and in whichever way, shape or form, as with all my content, as with all my podcast, I hope whoever you are, wherever you are with your weight loss journey, wherever you are with your current weight issue, you might take something from this to hopefully help you. Yeah. So I started my weight loss journey in 2014 and February 2014, and I was just over 500 pounds. So what was I like before that time? How long was I 500 pounds for? I don't actually know. I remember weighing myself. I didn't weigh myself that much when I was overweight because I didn't really have a scales that would weigh me. I've kind of got an inkling. When I was maybe 18 or 21, I remember getting on a set of scales and I was around 30 stone. So I've always been, throughout my adult life, at least 30 stone, over 400 pounds. But I would say from being 25-ish, which was mid-noughties, I've definitely been a lot closer to 500 pounds. So what was life like before I started my weight loss journey? Horrible. And I mean that. I didn't actually realise I was existing, not living. I didn't realize actually how bad my life was until I lost my weight. Until I realized what living was, I didn't realize I was just existing. And because I've always been morbidly obese, I was morbidly obese when I started high school, when I started college, when I started uni, when I started my first job, I didn't know the difference. So I didn't know, like I say, how bad my life was. But reflecting back now, life was horrible. Physically, I was in a mess. And I'm not saying every single person that is morbidly obese will have the same mobility issues that I had. But yeah, my body was broken. I was actually moved quite a bit. I didn't do any exercise or anything like that. And again, maybe I'm kidding myself. Maybe I didn't move that much. But I always felt, up to being 30, my level of movement wasn't that bad. Maybe it was. But from being 30 onwards, my mobility just decreased massively. I went to Benidorm for my 30th birthday and I ended up twisting my knee quite badly there. I hid it from my friends that came with me. And I soldiered through it, but it just got worse and worse when I got back. And that was the real start of when I really started to become sedentary in my everyday life. And I've learned from starting my weight loss journey that, I used to put my mobility issues solely on my obesity. Don't get me wrong, massive contributing factor, but I've learned recently, well, not recently, but from, being on my weight loss journey, certainly more from becoming a personal trainer and working as a weight loss coach, that if you don't use it, you lose it. That is a big, big saying. And from twisting my knee and deciding not to move that much, my body just weakened. So I suffer with psoriatic arthritis. I used to have really bad psoriasis when I was at the height of my weight issue. I still have little bits now, but I used to have about 50% body coverage when I was over 500 pounds. And I had psoriatic arthritis and I had skin plaques as arthritis. Yeah, psoriatic arthritis, and skin plaques as psoriasis as well. Now I've lost my weight. I would say I've got about 5% coverage. I have little bits on my head, tiny little bits, or a tiny bit there on my arm, on my right forearm, a couple of little bits on my left forearm. Other than that, I don't have any more on my body. And then I've just got little bits around my scalp, around my ears. Other than that, I don't have any psoriasis anymore. It just cleared up as I lost my weight. But I still suffer with psoriatic arthritis. I am medicated for it. You can hear or see that I am shaking my Tic Tacs at you. No, that is my sulfasalazine, which is my medication that I was prescribed from around 2010, and I've took it ever since. Since then, I've also been diagnosed with mild rheumatoid arthritis, and I will also have, just because of what my obesity has done to my body, osteoarthritis as well. So yeah, I'm pretty riddled with this stuff, but pre-starting my weight loss journey, my mobility, certainly for the last 6 months prior to start my weight loss journey, was kind of non-existent. I was in agony on a day-to-day basis. Lower back, hips, knees, ankles. I had plantar fasciitis. I had days where my arthritis was really bad, days where my arthritis was better. But yeah, I was in constant pain. I was going through days where I couldn't get out of bed. I was quite bedbound. I could just about drag myself to the toilet. But yeah, other than that, I was struggling. Now, I did used to go out a lot drinking, and that was one of my big pain reliefs. Not the right pain relief, but I used to go out most Friday nights in constant pain, but I used to get drunk before I went out. And for the rights or wrongs of it, that used to ease the pain and allow me to sort of move. But I never moved that much. My friend Keith used to pick me up most Friday nights. So I literally had to walk out of my house into his car. He used to park pretty much outside the front of the pub because he owned the pub. And then I'd wander myself into the pub and plant my bottom on a bar stool. And then that'd be me until I went home. And by the time I went home, I was that plastered, you couldn't have felt pain anyway. So my mobility was shocking. Not only was my mobility shocking, my flexibility, my actual, being able to bend down, put my socks on. I don't want to go into too much detail, but being able to hygienically clean myself after going to the toilet was a massive struggle. Being able to just take a shower was a massive struggle. Tying my shoelaces was a massive struggle. Being out of breath. You might have noticed in this podcast that I'm slightly out of breath doing it. I'm suffering a bit with a touch of hay fever at the moment. So if it sounds like I'm taking some deep breaths, that is the reason. My sinuses are a bit all over the place. But anyway, constantly out of breath. Just getting out of bed, going to the toilet, out of breath. Going up and down stairs. I used to take one stair at a time going down, one stair at a time going up. And yeah, it was to the point where if I'd not started my weight loss journey, I think another 6 months, I would have been completely bedbound. I wouldn't have been able to move. I would have probably needed carers to come in and do my personal care, to help me with my toileting. That is how severe my weight issue was at the time. I'm not saying every person that's my weight, but I wasn't even that old. I was 33 years of age. So I'm not saying every person that age, my weight, would have those issues. But yeah, not good. Not good at all. And it made me feel disgusting in myself. It made me feel disgusting in myself. I absolutely hated myself for the way I was living. I didn't really let anyone in my bedroom. I never cleaned it. I basically lived in what I would call, or certainly a lot of, at the time I didn't realize it because it was what I was used to. And this is the thing, you know, I never realized how bad my life was at the start of my weight loss journey until I lost the weight that I've lost, until I started living the way I live now. I never realized how bad all these things were. But yeah, I used to live in squalor. I always took pride in my personal hygiene because I had a lot of skin, I had a lot of rolls, I had a lot of places that sweat. So I did used to shower a lot, but it used to absolutely wipe me out. I can literally now get out of bed, shower, dry, get dressed in a couple of minutes. It would take me to do the same thing 10, 15 years ago, at least half an hour. It was physically exhausting just to go and take a shower. And I'll be honest with you, I've just said there, I used to take pride in my personal hygiene only when I was going out. Could I go 2-3 days without taking a shower? Yeah. Did that then lead to sores under my skin, in between my legs? Absolutely it did. And it was painful. Would they get infected? Yes. Then the doctors had to come and prescribe me antibiotics. I also used to really suffer with pressure sores on my body. And again, they used to get infected all the time. And it is just not the way a human being should live. Some people watching stroke listening to this might be sort of thinking, well, you did it to yourself. I'm fully aware of that. But just as a kind of yin to the yang of that, I had a food addiction. Now, a lot of people might just put, what a load of nonsense, just stop eating. That's like saying to an alcoholic, just stop drinking, like saying to a gambling addict, just stop gambling. When you have an addiction takes over. It's the only thing I had to get me through life, or that's how it felt. So yeah, I was trapped, and that is another feeling that I massively struggle with. I felt trapped on a constant basis in everything. I used to go to the pub every Friday, Saturday night. It was the only way, not every Friday or Saturday night, before, I'm talking about probably 12, 18 months before I started my weight loss journey. I just used to go on a Friday night. I used to go a lot more than that, but again, as my mobility decreased, I couldn't go that much. But I used to go every Friday night. I never really wanted to. I got to the point where I was sick of it. I was sick of going to the pub, sick of getting drunk, sick of spending the money. But I was trapped because it was the only thing I could do to get me out of the house. So it's the only thing I did that kind of got me out of the house. It was the thing I looked forward to get me out of the house, but I didn't actually want to do what I was doing to get out of the house. I just wanted to get out of the house. But I was trapped. I did a job for years that I hated, and I was trapped because I didn't have the confidence or the self-belief that I could do anything else. I knew I could do this one job at 37 stone, which I hated. Like, it was so detrimental to my mental health. It was untrue, but I couldn't see a way out. And again, it's kind of like a snowball. It just made my mental health worse and worse and worse. So I felt trapped in the things that I could do. I felt trapped in my bedroom. My bedroom was like a prison cell. I felt trapped in the work I was doing. I felt trapped in a life that I didn't want to live. And it was brutal. But feeling like that was so detrimental to my mental health, plus loads of other things. It triggered emotional eating because the only distraction I had was food. The only thing, although it didn't make me feel better long term. Long term, I felt the way I felt. Short term, it did make me feel better. And that's what an addiction is. So I was in constant pain. I constantly felt trapped. I was constantly scared. I was worried about, like, what happens if I get any worse? What am I going to do? At the time, I was actually in a bit of debt with money. And I was like, if I can't get up and get to work, I'm not going to be able to pay that. So I worried about that. I constantly worried about whether I was going to wake up the next day. There was just so much stuff going on in my head that, yeah, it became so overwhelming. I didn't know what to do. And I'm not going to talk about that in this podcast now, but I have talked about it in previous podcasts where I felt I only had one option at a point. What things did I really... So that's kind of how I felt as a person. What things did I really struggle with? What were the worst things about being, 37 stone? What things really, really got to me? There are some physical things. There are some mental things. One thing I always struggled with was judgment. Now, don't get me wrong. Look, I was 37 stone. I'm nearly 6'5". I'm not exactly, Mr. Camouflage, am I? I'm not blending into the crowd at that height and that weight. I'm not Mr. Camouflage. Now, I still get people staring at me now. Like, don't get me wrong. They're not staring at me in the same way. Staring. This is kind of what triggered this podcast. I was doing an everything weight loss session with my community this morning. And I don't know how we got onto the topic, but I said one of the worst things that I went through as a 37 stone morbidly obese person was getting stared at. It was the worst for me. Yes, I got called fat. Yes, I got called names. Yes, that was part and parcel of it. It was the staring. Not from children, because children, they maybe should know better, but they don't really know any better. And like I say, I wasn't exactly Mr. Camouflage. I wasn't blending into anything, but it was adults. And you get some adults. And look, like I say, I'm not exactly Mr. Inconspicuous. I'm an abnormality. I know that. And when you see something that's abnormal, you'll stop and look at it. And adults would look, some adults, and then they'd look away and they'd realise that, staring is rude and this, that, and the other. And that didn't bother me. I get it. But there were certain people that would stare at me. And you could tell behind their eyes, their judgment, what they were thinking. And it was brutal for me to take. Again, a massive trigger for my emotional eating. I'd go to town. I'd go to the supermarket. I'd go, and this is kind of, if I'm being honest with you, this is pre my major mobility issues. This is, I struggle with this from probably being in my late teens, early 20s. So yeah, if I go shopping into town, I go to a supermarket, I go to a restaurant, anywhere really, I'd at least have one person staring at me and staring at me in disbelief, staring at me in disgust. I found that one of the worst things for being the size that I was. I genuinely really, really struggled with it. Like I say, the name calling and stuff, and don't get me wrong, I was quite lucky in a way. I suppose I kept myself quite cocooned from life. Certainly for the last couple of years before I started my weight loss journey, I didn't really venture out of, I live in quite a small village. And I used to venture up to the next village. Other than that, I kept myself quite cocooned. But, I used to work in sales. I used to work all over the country. I used to drive about. So I couldn't. I was out there. And yeah, the staring was definitely one of the worst things. Another thing that I really struggled with was missing out. And again, I used to play this off, and to be fair to my friends, they always tried to include me in things, but I knew my limits. I knew what I could and couldn't do. So I got invited to lots of things. It could just be a walk on a Saturday afternoon. It could be going and playing some sports. It could be going to watch some sports. It could be going on a holiday. And don't get me wrong, I did go on some holidays, like I say. I went and celebrated my 30th with a load of friends in Benidorm, and we did do a holiday the year before that as well. But I missed out on loads. And what made it worse was social media, because with social media, people can post their everyday life. And obviously this was probably detrimental to my mental health at the time, but I don't know if it wasn't a trigger at some point, again, as a contributing factor to make me kick into my weight loss journey. But I was really jealous. I really struggled with jealousy and envy. Sometimes in a good way, but a lot of time in a bad way, because I'd see people posting themselves, going on holiday, going on a walk, going out for dinner. Seeing people post themselves with their partner, even if it was just on the sofa on a Friday night watching a film, I had none of that. And it used to beat me up inside. Again, it was existing, not living. So yeah, I really struggled with missing out. Things that might seem quite materialistic, cars. I love cars. I was always a bit of a car person as a kid, and I had some really nice cars when I first passed my driving test. But I got to a point where I stopped being able to fit in cars. I used to have cars like a Mondeo or something like that, 'cause it was the only car I could actually physically get in and out of. I couldn't get in and out of a little sports car. I remember a lad that used to work at the local pub, and he turned up one night, and he worked at the local pub, but he also had quite a good job, and he didn't drink alcohol. So he was a bit of a money grabber, as it were. So he used to have a pretty decent job, and he worked at a local pub. And I remember he got a 1 Series BMW, and he was a really nice guy. And he got this 1 Series BMW, and he rocked up in it, and we're out, and he'd come in, and he wasn't working that night, got his new car, went to go, and he was like, right, we're going out, like you do as lads. I was probably late 20s at the time, something like that. And he pulled up in the car park, right, we're going out. It was summer, it was a nice night. We're like, right, we'll go and do a few pubs. He didn't really drink, so he was designated driver. I couldn't fit in it. I could not get in that car. It absolutely embarrassment. But, and to be fair to my mates, they were literally like, oh, well, we don't need to do it tonight, and this, that, and the other. And I literally, what am I meant to do? And I went, no, you go, it's fine. I said, to be honest with you, I'm really knackered anyway. I'm only going to have another pint. So I played it off. They disappeared off. I went back in the pub, had another 2 pints, went home, and I was just in bits over it. And it wasn't the fact, you might be sat there going, it was a ride in a car. It's what it represented. It was how my obesity was holding me back. Clothes was a big one. I like my clothes, and I've gone through a phase, and anyone that's been on a weight loss journey and had weight loss success, how expensive are clothes? I realised it now. And my clothes addiction is over. In fact, I sold so many clothes on Vinted last year. I have definitely taught myself a lesson over the last few years, if I'm being honest with you. But clothes, I could never buy the latest trends. I could never buy anything off the peg. Before the internet boomed, certainly this is way before I started my weight loss journey, I used to massively struggle. There were a couple of like big fella shops. It wasn't Giacomo then or anything like that, or even ASOS now does 4, 5XL. There was none of that. There was a couple of big men's shops in and around the area, well, around the country. They'd send you a magazine, you could flick through it, you could order it online. I used to get a few bits from America on eBay as well. Clothes was just an absolute nightmare. It's only recently that I've stopped doing this. When I first started going on holiday and I got my wife Rachel, I used to take a backpack, or I used to take a mini case with me. And she was like, we've got a whole case now. You don't need... No. I like to put a few bits in my mini case just in case the suitcase gets lost. And she was like, all right, The real reason, and it is in case the suitcase gets lost, but I probably went from being I went on a holiday in 2009, 2010 and 2011. So I went on 3 holidays, and then went on 2 stag do's as well in 2012 and 2013. And I got a little bit more confident about going away. My mates were very, very good about it. I did struggle a couple of times. I had to buy 2 seats for a plane rather than 1, and this, that and the other. But I managed to get abroad. I was so paranoid about losing my suitcase, because now I'm like, if I lose my suitcase, yeah, it's annoying and it would absolutely do my head in and probably ruin my holiday. But if I lose my suitcase, like, now I'm going away in a few weeks. If I lose my suitcase, I'll nip to a shop, I'll buy a pair of swim shorts, I'll buy a t-shirt, well, it is what it is. It's annoying, but it's not gonna, you know, it's not gonna be the end of the world, as it were. Like I said, did I just say then it might ruin my holiday? I meant it won't ruin my holiday. It's annoying and this, that, and the other, and it'd be frustrating, but, you know, I can sort something out. At 37 stone, you don't have that option. If your case goes missing, you are stuck in the clothes you are travelling in. So, as a safety measure, I always used to want to take clothes on the plane with me at the same time. I don't do that anymore. I've got away from that, but yeah, overcautious. And there was always that worry. Every time I went on a plane, the embarrassment of asking for an extender, and it's not really embarrassing. And I was never made to feel out of place with it. It just felt embarrassing to me. But that fear of standing there waiting for your case to come and like, my case don't come. Like, what am I going to do? I've only got the clothes whereas, like I say, and I know it might sound daft, but these are the things you have to think of. Yeah, I know I've probably got off on a right tangent there, but I'm just opening up. There was no major plan to this podcast. I just wanted to talk about it. But yeah, my life being over £500, constant pain, constant worry, constant judgment from people, constantly feeling like I'm missing out, feeling trapped, feeling stuck, struggling to do basic everyday tasks and living the way a human being should not have to live. And I see a lot of overweight people on social media and they get trolled like mad. I see a lot of overweight people in day-to-day life and I look at them and I just have empathy for them because I know what they're going through. And like I say, I'm not saying everything that I struggled with, they're struggling with, but I just know how hard life is as someone that is even obese. But like I say, when you get to being my size, over £500, forget about the detriment that's having on my long-term health, which is still something I worry about now. And, I do, things can improve, I get that, but things like your heart or plaques in your arteries, overconsumption, this, that, and the other, you can improve them slightly and you can do things not to cause any more damage. But I do worry about my heart. I do. It is what it is. There's nothing I can do about it, and I've just got to live the best life I can live now, but it is something I worry about. Now, I talked about this, and you might be sat there going, don't sound too bad, that Neil, to be honest with you. Like I say, it was absolutely brutal. But I didn't realise how bad it was until I've been on this weight loss journey and I see the way I live now. I've got asked a few times in the past, if you could have lost the weight you've lost now sooner, would you have done? And that is such a hard question to answer, and I'll tell you why. On the plus side of things, if I'd lost all my weight in my early 20s, would I have had more of a life to live? Yes. I would have, I felt like I was reborn. I know it sounds cliched. It might sound a bit cringy, but I did, I know a lot of people struggle with things like when they hit 40, they kind of have a wobble and a bit of a midlife crisis. I've never suffered with that. So I suppose that's a bonus because at 40 years old, I'm happier and healthier than I've ever been throughout my life, or I was at 40 years old. And that's going to be the same in 5 years' time when I'm 50 years of age. I'm still going to be in a great position. I'm going to be much happier and healthier at 50 than when I was 30, than probably when I was 20. So I don't really think about that. But, I did miss out on a lot of life. I did miss out as a youngster. I've never done the career that I wanted to. I always wanted to be a teacher. I would have loved to have been a teacher. Why did I never pursue being a teacher? High school was brutal for me. I really struggled with high school. So to actually work in that environment every day, 5 days a week, surrounded by kids, wasn't for me. If I had my time again and I'd lost all my weight at 2021, I would be a teacher now. That would be my profession. That is what I would have gone into. So, yeah, my obesity has held me back. And, you know, I certainly would have taken a different career path. I certainly wouldn't have the mobility issues now because I'm still riddled with arthritis, right? That's not going to change. I need 2 new knees. I need 2 new hips. That is going to need to be done at some point in time. I get through my mobility. I'm kind of used to it. I've got a pretty decent pain threshold. I try not to let it hold me back. I am medicated for it. Some days I'll live a little bit, or some weeks I'll live a little bit off ibuprofen and other painkillers to get me through, but it is what it is. I can still live a decent life. If I'd lost my weight sooner, I wouldn't have had those issues. But this is the thing that stops me going, if you could have lost your weight sooner, would you have done it? This is what stops me going, yes, absolutely, of course I would. I'm a big believer in like the butterfly effect. What's happened throughout time leads us to where we are today. And I love my wife. I do love my wife, but I love my life today, right? And I wouldn't have met my wife if I'd lost weight at 21. I probably wouldn't have met Rachel. If I'd lost my weight at 21, I wouldn't be recording this podcast now. And I love what I do for a living. It gives me a real sense of, not achievement, gratitude, no. You know what I mean? I love it. I love helping other people lose weight. It gives me a sense of achievement. Recording content, helping other people, getting the positive feedback from people that I'm helping them on their weight loss journey. I love the friends that I've got now. I love my dogs. I love my house. I love my wife. I love the life that I have nowadays. And if I'd lost all my weight at 21, would I be where I am today? So the trade-off for me is, yes, I did exist and not live until being 33 years of age. The lifestyle that I led, being morbidly obese, has led to some things that I'm going to suffer with for the rest of my life. Yes. But if I hadn't gone through that, I might not have had what I've got today. And I'm so grateful and so thankful. And I absolutely love my life today and what I have got. I wouldn't do anything to compromise that. So the honest answer is, if I could have lost my weight sooner, if I could have got on a journey sooner than February 2014, would I have done? No. Because those years of physical and mental torture, if I'm going to be honest with you, in my eyes, are all worth it for what I've ended up with right now. There we go. Like I say, I had no idea where I was going with that podcast, if I'm being honest with you, but it was just one to open up. And yeah, as with all my content, hopefully something somewhere might resonate or flick a switch or add a little bit of inspiration or motivation if it stops anyone out there that could be slipping into that morbid obese state. If it makes you go, do you know what? You're right, Neil. I don't want to be like that. I don't want to feel like I'm just existing and not living. And it just gives you that spark to start your journey off and have a successful weight loss journey. That is enough for me. Anyway, there we go. That is episode 54 of The Real Loss Boss. I'm getting all tongue-tied now at the end of this. Let's start again. That is episode 54 of The Real Loss Boss. Let's start again. Come on, Neil, you can do it. That is episode 54 of the Real Loss Boss podcast. Done and dusted. And until next time I see you, make sure you are, because we don't want you being, or we want you to stop being morbidly obese. Yeah, make sure you are bossing your weight loss.